My name is Victoria, and I just turned 18 years old. I grew up in a middle class family in Boston, always the responsible one, with big dreams for college. My grandparents left me a trust fund specifically for my education at Columbia. Today should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, my parents sat me down and told me they had spent 95% of my money on my twin sisters' figure skating careers. The look in their eyes as they hoped for my understanding shattered something inside me forever. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal into my greatest strength, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by those who should have protected you. I grew up in a modest three-bedroom house in the suburbs of Boston. My parents were hardworking people who always emphasized the importance of family. My dad worked as an accountant at a local firm, and my mom taught third grade at the elementary school in our neighborhood. We never had extravagant vacations or the newest gadgets, but we had what we needed. At least that's what I thought until my sisters came along. Allison and Amanda were born when I was 3 years old, identical twins with golden blonde hair and bright blue eyes that everyone immediately fell in love with. I remember being excited to be a big sister, eager to help my parents take care of them. My earliest memories include standing on a step stool beside their cribs, singing them lullabies while my exhausted mother took a much-needed nap. When I was 5 years old, my grandparents from my father's side set up a trust fund specifically for me. They had always been supportive of education, both having graduated from Columbia University. My grandmother had been one of the few women in her class studying literature, while my grandfather had pursued business economics. Their dream was for me to follow in their footsteps, attending their alma mater, and pursuing whatever degree I wanted. The trust fund was substantial. At the time, I didn't understand the value of money, but I remember my parents' excitement when my grandparents explained that my college education would be fully covered. The trust had specific conditions I would gain access when I turned 18, and the money was explicitly designated for my education expenses. My grandparents were amazing people. Every Sunday, they would pick me up for what they called Victoria Day. We would visit museums, go to the theater, or simply sit in their sunroom reading books together. Those were some of the happiest moments of my childhood. They always made me feel special, seen in a way I rarely felt at home. Sadly, they both passed away when I was 12. My grandfather went first, after a battle with cancer, and my grandmother followed just 4 months later. The doctor said it was heart failure, but everyone knew she had lost her will to live without her husband of 53 years. Their loss hit me hard, but I found comfort knowing they had cared enough to secure my future. Meanwhile, my sisters were developing into talented figure skaters. It started as a simple winter activity when they were 4, but their coach quickly noticed their potential. By the time they were 7, they were competing regionally, and by 9, they had qualified for national junior competitions. My parents became increasingly consumed by their potential. What began as a fun activity transformed into an all-consuming obsession. Our family schedule revolved entirely around their practice times, competitions, and recovery. My mother eventually quit her teaching job to become their full-time manager, coordinating with coaches, choreographers, and costume designers. As the twins' success grew, I faded further into the background. While they received new skating outfits, private coaching sessions, and endless praise, I learned to be self-sufficient. I excelled academically, maintaining a 4.0 GPA throughout high school. I joined the debate team and the school newspaper, building my resume for college applications. I worked part-time at the local library, saving what I could for extra college expenses. I never complained about the disproportionate attention or resources. I understood the twins had a special talent that required support. When my parents missed my Honor Society induction because it conflicted with the twins' regional competition, I told myself it was fine. When Christmas gifts became noticeably unbalanced, with the twins receiving expensive skating equipment, while I got practical items like socks and school supplies, I convinced myself it was because of their needs, not because they were loved more. But the imbalance grew steadily worse. Family dinners became forums for discussing skating techniques and competition strategies. My academic achievements warranted brief congratulations before the conversation inevitably shifted back to the twins. Even extended family gatherings centered around watching videos of their latest performances with relatives fawning over their grace and potential. The twins themselves weren't malicious. They were just children thriving in the spotlight our parents continuously directed at them. They became accustomed to being the center of attention, to having their needs prioritized. They didn't notice when I stopped sharing my own achievements, or when I started spending more time in my room or at the library. They were too wrapped up in their own world of ice and ambition. As my 18th birthday approached, I found comfort in knowing I would soon have access to my trust fund. Columbia University had always been my dream, both to honor my grandparents and because of their prestigious journalism program. I had been accepted with a partial scholarship, but would still need significant financial support for tuition, housing, and expenses in New York City. I saw the trust fund as my ticket to independence, a chance to step out of the shadows and pursue my own dreams. I never imagined my parents would betray the explicit wishes of my grandparents. I never thought they would sacrifice my future for the twins' present. I never suspected they had already spent years systematically draining the account that was meant to secure my education and my future. The night before my birthday, I lay awake imagining the possibilities ahead. I pictured myself walking through the iconic gates of Columbia, sitting in historic lecture halls, and building a life where I wasn't just the responsible older sister of two skating prodigies. I had no idea that dream was already shattered, that the next day would force me to completely reimagine my future and my understanding of family. I woke up on my 18th birthday with a feeling of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Today was the day I would finally gain access to my trust fund and secure my future at Columbia University. I had already calculated exactly how much I would need for tuition, housing, meals, and books. I had researched the most affordable student apartments in the area. I had even planned how I would budget the remaining money to last through my 4 years of undergraduate studies. I got dressed in my favorite blue sweater and jeans, nothing fancy, but something that made me feel confident. I had straightened my hair and applied minimal makeup, wanting to look mature for what I considered a significant milestone in my life. When I came downstairs, my parents and sisters were waiting in the kitchen with a small chocolate cake and a few wrapped presents. Mom, who normally left by 7:30 for the twins' morning practice, had stayed home. Dad had taken the day off work. The twins were still in their pajamas, unusual for a weekday when they typically had preschool ice time. Something felt off about the scene, but I pushed the thought aside, attributing their behavior to making my birthday special. Mom hugged me tightly. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." 18, I can't believe it. Dad's smile seemed strained as he handed me a small gift bag. "Happy birthday, Victoria. We're proud of you." Inside the bag was a silver charm bracelet, with a single charm, a miniature graduation cap. It was nice, but nowhere near as elaborate as the custom skating pendant necklaces the twins had received on their 15th birthday last year. "Thanks, it's beautiful," I said sincerely, slipping it onto my wrist. The twins gave me a card they had made decorated with glitter and stickers. Inside, they had written identical messages wishing me a happy birthday. I appreciated the gesture, knowing they had taken time away from their rigorous schedule to remember my special day. Breakfast was awkward. My parents kept exchanging glances, and the twins seemed oblivious to the tension chattering about their upcoming regional competition. I ate my cake and answered questions about my college plans, explaining once again why Columbia's journalism program was perfect for my career goals. "New York is so expensive," Mom commented, not for the first time. "Are you sure you wouldn't consider Boston University? You could live at home and save money." "The trust fund will cover Columbia," I reminded her, excitement creeping into my voice. "And I've saved enough from my library job to cover extras. Plus, I received that partial scholarship." Another look passed between my parents, one I couldn't quite interpret. The rest of the day passed with an undercurrent of tension. I went to school where my friends surprised me with cupcakes at lunch. My English teacher announced that my essay on media ethics had been selected for a statewide competition. By the time I returned home, I was ready to discuss the trust fund details with my parents. Dinner was unusually formal. Mom had prepared my favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread and a side salad. The twins were surprisingly quiet, focused entirely on their food. Dad kept clearing his throat, a nervous habit he displayed when he had to discuss difficult subjects with clients. After we finished eating and the twins had cleared the table, my parents asked me to join them in the living room. The twins disappeared upstairs, clearly having been briefed to make themselves scarce. Victoria. Dad began, his voice unnaturally formal. Now that you're 18, we need to discuss the trust fund your grandparents established for you. My heart quickened with anticipation. This was it, the moment I would officially have the means to pursue my dreams. As you know, the fund was created to cover your education expenses, he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. We're so proud of your acceptance to Columbia, Mom interjected, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. Your academic achievements have been remarkable. Something in their demeanor sent a chill down my spine. I sat straighter, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Dad took a deep breath. The thing is, Victoria, over the past several years, we've had to make some difficult decisions as a family. The twins' skating career has required significant financial investment. Private coaches, international competitions, specialized training camps, custom costumes. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? We've had to utilize some of your trust fund to support their development. He said, the words coming out in a rush. Their talent is extraordinary, once in a lifetime according to their coaches. They have real Olympic potential. The room seemed to tilt around me. Some of the fund? How much? Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Sweetheart, we always intended to replace it, but the expenses kept mounting. The international competitions alone cost thousands. How much? I repeated, my voice barely audible. Dad finally met my gaze. 95%. The words hit me like a physical blow. 95%. Almost all of it. My college fund. My future. My grandparents' gift. That's not possible, I whispered. The trust was for my education. It was specifically designated. As your legal guardians, we had access until you turned 18. Dad explained, his accountant voice taking over. We made the decision we thought was best for the family as a whole. Best for the family? I echoed, disbelief turning to anger. Or best for Allison and Amanda? Their success benefits all of us, Mom insisted. When they make it to the Olympics, the sponsorships and opportunities will more than replace what we've used. And if they don't make it, what about my college education that starts in 4 months? My parents exchanged another glance. Columbia is very expensive, Mom said gently. Boston University has offered you a larger scholarship package. Living at home would save on housing costs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had stolen my future and were now trying to reshape it to fit their narrative. What's left? I asked, my voice hollow. Dad named a figure that wouldn't cover even one semester at Columbia. 5%, a pittance of what should have been mine. We know this is disappointing, Mom said, reaching for me again. But we hope you'll understand that family means making sacrifices. The twins' opportunity is once in a lifetime. And mine isn't. I stood up, my legs shaking. My acceptance to Columbia, my journalism dreams, those aren't once in a lifetime. You're so smart, Victoria, Dad said, as if that were a consolation. You'll succeed wherever you go. I looked at these people, my parents, suddenly feeling like I was seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't just asking me to understand, they were expecting me to quietly accept this massive betrayal and adjust my life plans accordingly. They genuinely believed they'd done nothing wrong, that their actions were justifiable, because the twin skating was somehow more valuable than my education. My grandparents wanted me to go to Columbia, I said, my voice breaking. They set up that fund specifically for me, for their alma mater. They would have understood the exceptional circumstances, Mom insisted. The twins' talent is truly extraordinary. I turned away, unable to look at them any longer. I need to be alone. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I passed the twins' room. Through the partially open door, I could see them practicing spins on the special flooring my parents had installed to allow them to train at home. They were completely oblivious to the fact that their opportunities had come at the cost of mine. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face as I tried to process the betrayal. How many times had I watched my parents cheer enthusiastically at the twins' skating events while barely acknowledging my academic honors? How many times had I accepted less because the twins needed it more? In the morning, with swollen eyes and a hollow feeling in my chest, I searched through my father's home office and found the trust fund documents. Years of systematic withdrawals, each one signed by both my parents, each one eroding my future bit by bit. The paper trail of betrayal was meticulous, as befitted my father's accounting background. The final withdrawal had been made just 2 months ago, $15,000 for the twins to attend an elite summer training camp in Switzerland. By then, there was so little left that they must have known they'd never be able to replace it before my birthday. I sat among the scattered papers, the magnitude of what they'd done washing over me in waves. They hadn't just taken my money, they had stolen my grandparents' final gift to me. They had decided that my sister's ambitions were worth more than mine. They had looked at their 3 children and decided that only 2 of them deserved investment. The week following my birthday was the darkest period of my life. I moved through each day in a fog, going through the motions at school while internally grappling with the profound sense of betrayal and worthlessness. Every time I saw my parents, a wave of resentment and pain washed over me. They continued with their normal routine, acting as if our conversation had resolved the matter, as if I had accepted their explanation and moved on. After 3 days of minimal communication, I tried once more to make them understand the magnitude of what they had done. I approached them in the kitchen after the twins had gone to bed. "I need to talk to you about the trust fund again," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom immediately looked uncomfortable. "Victoria, we've been through this. We understand you're disappointed, but what's done is done." "Disappointed," I repeated. "Is that what you think I am?" "I'm not disappointed. I'm devastated. You took something that was explicitly meant for me, for my education." Dad sighed, setting down his coffee mug. "In a family, sometimes individual wants have to be sacrificed for exceptional opportunities." "This wasn't a want," I countered. "This was my future, my education, and it wasn't yours to sacrifice." "You don't understand the level of commitment required for elite athletics," Mom said. "The twins have exceptional talent. Their coaches believe they could make the Olympic team in 4 years." "And what if they don't?" I asked. "What if all this investment leads nowhere? You've gambled my certain future on their possible one." "That's not fair," Dad said, his voice hardening. "We're their parents. It's our job to support their potential." "You're my parents, too," I whispered, the pain raw in my voice. "Or at least I thought you were." They exchanged a glance I had seen too many times, the one that said I was being difficult, unreasonable. In that moment, I realized they would never truly acknowledge what they had done. In their minds, they had made a justifiable choice for the greater good of the family, meaning the twins. The next day, I overheard my mother on the phone with her friend Diane, whose daughter had been in my class since elementary school. "Victoria's being dramatic about the trust fund situation," she said, unaware I was in the hallway. "She's always been the responsible one. I thought she would understand that family resources need to go where they'll have the biggest impact. The girls have a real shot at the Olympics. That's worth any investment. Any investment, including my college education, including my grandparents' wishes, including my future." As days passed, I began noticing more examples of how thoroughly my parents had prioritized the twins. Their room was twice the size of mine, created by combining 2 bedrooms when I was 12. Their closets were filled with not just skating costumes, but designer clothes for interviews and appearances. Even the family photo wall in the hallway had gradually become dominated by their skating achievements, with my school photos relegated to smaller frames near the bottom. When I looked through our family expense records, trying to understand the magnitude of what had been spent, I was shocked. Private coaches at $200 per hour 3 times a week, choreographers at $500 per program, custom costumes running $2,000 each, international competition fees, travel expenses, special training camps. The list was endless, the total astronomical. Meanwhile, I had been working at the library for minimum wage to save for my own expenses, buying clothes from thrift shops and using the same laptop since freshman year. Despite it barely functioning, my depression deepened as I realized this wasn't a one-time decision, but a pattern that had defined our family dynamic for years. I had always been the afterthought, the child who didn't need attention because she was so mature and so independent. What I had interpreted as trust in my abilities had actually been neglect. My grades began to slip for the first time. I couldn't focus on schoolwork when my entire future seemed to be crumbling. My teachers noticed the change, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the situation. How could I tell them my parents had essentially stolen my college fund for my sister's skating lessons? The following weekend, we attended a family gathering at my aunt's house. As usual, the twins were the center of attention, showing videos of their latest competition on their tablets, while relatives cooed and applauded. My recent selection as a finalist in the statewide essay competition warranted only a passing, "That's nice," from my uncle, before he turned back to watching Amanda's triple axel attempt. I sat alone in the corner of the living room watching my family fawn over my sisters while I remained invisible. My cousin Sarah, who was home from her first year of college, noticed my isolation and sat beside me. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I almost said yes automatically, but something in her genuine concern broke through my defenses. "Not really," I admitted. "I just found out my parents spent my college fund on the twins skating." Sarah's eyes widened. "Your trust fund, the one from your grandparents." I nodded, relieved that someone else recognized the significance. 95% of it. I can't afford Columbia now." "That's messed up," she said, her bluntness refreshing after my parents' justifications. "Have you talked to them about it?" "They think I should understand because the twins have Olympic potential." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Sarah looked across the room at my parents, who were showing my aunt photos from the twins' recent competition. "That doesn't make it right," she said. "That money was specifically for you." Having someone validate my feelings released something inside me. For the first time since my birthday, I felt seen and heard. I wasn't being unreasonable or selfish for feeling betrayed. That night, as we drove home from the gathering, I overheard my parents discussing the twins' summer plans. "The coach says the Switzerland camp is essential if they want to compete at the senior level next season," Mom was saying. "It's expensive, but we still have that last bit of Victoria's fund if we need it, the remaining 5%. They were planning to take that too. Something inside me snapped. The quiet, understanding daughter who had accepted years of being sidelined disappeared. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, a young woman filled with righteous anger and determination. When we got home, I went straight to my room and opened my laptop. With shaking hands, I began researching trust fund laws and fiduciary responsibility. I learned that as trustees, my parents had a legal obligation to manage the trust according to my grandparents' stated intentions. Using the money for the twins' skating clearly violated that obligation. I found the contact information for Mr. Dawson, my grandparents' attorney, who had helped set up the trust. Though it was Sunday evening, I sent him an email explaining the situation and asking for his guidance. To my surprise, he called me first thing Monday morning. "Victoria," he said, his voice grave after I explained what had happened. "What your parents did was not just morally wrong, it was legally questionable. The trust was explicitly created for your educational expenses at Columbia. As trustees, they had a fiduciary duty to protect those assets for the stated purpose." "What can I do?" I asked, hope flickering for the first time in days. "We can take legal action," he said. "It won't be pleasant, and it will certainly create family conflict, but you have a strong case for breach of fiduciary duty." The thought of suing my own parents was overwhelming, but so was the prospect of giving up on Columbia and my future. As I hung up the phone, I knew I had reached a turning point. I could continue to be the understanding daughter who sacrificed for her sisters, or I could stand up for myself and the future my grandparents had wanted for me. The decision crystallized when I came home from school that afternoon to find my mother on the phone with the Swiss training camp using my credit card number to place a deposit for the twins' summer program. My credit card, which I had worked 30 hours a week all summer to build credit for my future. Without asking, without even telling me. That was the moment I knew I had to fight back. Not just for my trust fund, but for my dignity, my future, and the recognition that my dreams mattered too. It was time to make my parents understand that their golden daughters weren't the only children deserving of investment and support. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt since before my birthday. I had spent most of the night researching my legal options and planning my approach. I knew confronting my parents would be difficult, but I was done being the silent, accommodating daughter they had taken for granted. I waited until evening when the entire family would be home. The twins had afternoon practice, and my parents always had a family dinner on Tuesdays before taking them to their specialized strength training session. I spent the afternoon gathering documents, everything from the original trust paperwork to the withdrawal records I had found in my father's office. I made copies and organized them chronologically, creating a clear picture of how systematically they had drained my education fund. When dinner was nearly finished, I took a deep breath and spoke. I need to talk to all of you about something important. My parents exchanged a worried glance, but the twins continued eating, barely paying attention. Can it wait? Mom asked, checking her watch. The girls have strength training in 45 minutes. No, I said firmly. It can't wait. This concerns all of us. Dad sighed and set down his fork. What is it, Victoria? I placed the folder of documents on the table. I've been doing some research about my trust fund, the one Grandma and Grandpa set up for my education. The twins finally looked up, confusion on their identical faces. Victoria, we've already discussed this, Dad said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I had grown to hate. No, you've explained your justification for taking my money. We haven't actually discussed it. I turned to my sisters. Did you two know that Mom and Dad spent my college fund on your skating? Their eyes widened in perfect synchronization. What? Amanda asked. Our grandparents set up a trust fund specifically for my education at Columbia. I explained, keeping my voice calm and factual. Over the past 6 years, Mom and Dad have withdrawn 95% of it to pay for your coaches' competitions, costumes, and training camps. Allison looked at our parents. Is that true? We've invested in your careers, Dad said defensively. As parents, we have to make decisions about where family resources go. It wasn't a family resource, I countered, pulling out the trust document. It was specifically designated for my education at Columbia. Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to attend their alma mater just like they did. Your sisters have exceptional talent, Mom said, her voice rising. Do you know how rare it is to have the potential they do? Coaches with Olympic experience have said they could go all the way. And that justifies stealing my future, I asked. We didn't steal anything, Dad snapped. We made parental decisions about family priorities. I pulled out the next document, sliding it across the table. According to my grandparents' attorney, what you did constitutes breach of fiduciary duty. As trustees, you were legally obligated to protect those assets for their stated purpose, my education. The color drained from my father's face. As an accountant, he understood the legal implications immediately. Amanda looked horrified. I didn't know the money for our skating was coming from Victoria's college fund. Of course you didn't, I assured her. This isn't your fault. It was Mom and Dad's decision. You wouldn't really take legal action against your own parents, Mom said, but uncertainty tinged her voice. I don't want to, I admitted, but you've left me with no options. In 4 months, I'm supposed to start at Columbia, and now I can't afford even 1 semester. What would you have me do? Boston University offered you a good scholarship, Dad began, but I cut him off. This isn't about finding a cheaper alternative. This is about you systematically prioritizing their dreams over mine for years. This is about you violating Grandma and Grandpa's explicit wishes. This is about you deciding that I matter less than they do. The silence that followed was deafening. The twins looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and our parents. We never meant for you to feel less important, Mom finally said, though her words rang hollow. Then what did you expect? You've spent years channeling every family resource toward their skating. You've missed my academic events while attending every one of their competitions. You've celebrated their minor achievements while barely acknowledging my major ones. And now, you've taken the one thing that was specifically meant for me. I turned to my sisters. I want you to understand that I don't blame you. You didn't ask for any of this, but I do need you to recognize what's been sacrificed for your careers. Allison, always the more sensitive twin, had tears in her eyes. I never thought about it that way. We just did what Mom and Dad arranged for us. Dad's expression hardened. Victoria, you're being melodramatic. Yes, we use the trust fund for the family's benefit, but that doesn't mean we love you any less than the twins. Actions speak louder than words, I replied, my voice breaking despite my efforts to remain composed. And your actions have made it crystal clear where your priorities lie. I gathered my documents and stood up. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. Either you find a way to restore my trust fund, or I'll be forced to take legal action. You wouldn't sue your own family, Mom said, but her voice wavered. I didn't think my own family would steal from me either, yet here we are. I looked each of them in the eye. I'll be staying with Megan for a few days. Her parents have offered me their guest room while I figure things out. You're leaving? Allison asked, sounding panicked. I need some space, I explained. And honestly, I can't stand to be in this house right now watching everyone pretend that what happened is normal or acceptable. Dad stood up. You're being childish, Victoria. Running away won't solve anything. I'm not running away, I corrected him. I'm setting a boundary. Something I should have done years ago when it became clear that this family only has room for two daughters' dreams. I walked upstairs to get the bag I had packed earlier, knowing this confrontation might end with me needing to leave. As I came back down, the twins were in the foyer, both looking distressed. We didn't know, Amanda said quietly, about the trust fund. I believe you, I said, softening slightly. Like I said, this isn't on you. Will you come back? Allison asked. I hefted my bag onto my shoulder. That depends on Mom and Dad and whether they're willing to make this right. As I walked out the front door, I heard my mother start to cry, and my father trying to comfort her. The sound didn't move me the way it once would have. Their tears now, after years of disregarding my feelings, seemed too little too late. Megan's parents welcomed me warmly, asking no questions, when I said I needed a place to stay for a while due to family issues. They had always been kind to me, and their home had been a refuge during the years when my own house had felt less and less like it belonged to me. That night, my phone buzzed constantly with texts from my parents alternating between anger and guilt trips. I can't believe you would embarrass us like this. After everything we've sacrificed for this family, the twins are devastated that you've left. Is this how you repay us for raising you? I turned off my phone, unable to deal with their manipulation. For the first time, I was seeing their behavior clearly for what it was. They weren't just parents making tough financial decisions, they were actively choosing to value two children over the third. And now that I was standing up for myself, they were trying every tactic to force me back into the compliant self, sacrificing role I had played for too long. The next morning, I was surprised to receive a call from my Aunt Lisa, my mother's sister. We had always been close, but she lived in Chicago, and we only saw her a few times a year. Victoria, she said when I answered. Your mother called me in hysterics last night. She says you've threatened to sue them and have moved out of the house. What's going on? I explained the situation with the trust fund, expecting her to take my parents' side. To my surprise, she didn't. I always wondered how they afforded all that skating training, she said. Your mother would brag about the girls' expensive coaches and international competitions, but I knew your dad's accounting salary and her part-time teaching couldn't cover it all. You believe me? I asked, relief washing over me. Of course I do. I love my sister, but she's always had a blind spot when it comes to the twins. Even when you were little, before they started skating, she would go on and on about how special they were, how extraordinary. I tried to point out that you were pretty extraordinary too. Straight A student reading at a college level in elementary school. But she would just say Victoria's fine, like being exceptional academically wasn't as impressive as being photogenic twins. Her validation brought tears to my eyes. I don't know what to do now, Aunt Lisa. I don't want to sue my parents, but I don't see how else I can get them to understand what they've done. Sometimes people only understand when there are real consequences, she said gently. Have you spoken with a lawyer yet? I contacted Grandpa's attorney. He says I have a strong case. She was quiet for a moment. Then you need to do what's right for your future. If they won't listen to reason, maybe they'll listen to legal action. After we hung up, I sat on Megan's back porch contemplating my next steps. The thought of taking my own parents to court made me physically ill. But the alternative, giving up on Columbia and my dreams, seemed equally impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Amanda. Got a new phone to text you privately. Can we meet and talk? I hesitated, wondering if this was my parents' attempt to manipulate me through my sister. But something told me to give her the benefit of the doubt. Coffee shop on Main Street, 4 p.m., I texted back. When I arrived at the cafe, Amanda was already there, sitting in a corner booth away from windows. She looked different without her twin beside her, smaller somehow, and less confident. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here." "What did you want to talk about?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She twisted her hands nervously. "First, I want you to know that Allison and I truly had no idea about the trust fund. We knew skating was expensive, but we thought Mom and Dad were managing it with their jobs and maybe some loans." "I believe you," I said. "Like I told you yesterday, I don't blame either of you." She took a deep breath. "There's something else you should know. I've been wanting to quit skating for almost a year now." That surprised me. "What? But you're so good at it. The Olympics and everything." "That's Mom and Dad's dream, not mine," she said, looking down at her hands. "Don't get me wrong, I loved skating when we started. But the last few years, it's become more pressure than pleasure. The constant training, the competitions, the scrutiny. I'm 16, and I haven't had a normal teenage experience. No school dances, no hanging out with friends, no dating." "Have you told Mom and Dad?" She shook her head. "I can't. They've invested everything in our skating careers. Every time I try to bring it up, they talk about all the sacrifices they've made, all the money they've spent. And now I find out that money was actually yours. It makes me feel even worse." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Amanda, if you're unhappy, you need to tell them. Your mental health matters more than any investment they've made." "They'll be so disappointed," she whispered. "And what about Allison? We've always done everything together." "Does she feel the same way about skating?" "No, she still loves it. She's the one with the real talent anyway. I've just been keeping up because it's what was expected." In that moment, I saw my sister clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not as one half of the Golden Twins, but as an individual with her own desires and struggles. She had been trapped in her role just as I had been in my different sides of the same dysfunctional family dynamic. "I want to help you," I said finally. "And I think maybe you can help me too." After my conversation with Amanda, I spent several days in a dark emotional place. The weight of everything, my parents' betrayal, my uncertain future, the impending legal battle pressed down on me until I could barely function. I went through the motions at school, but my mind was elsewhere, cycling through anger, grief, and panic. Megan and her parents were wonderful, giving me space when I needed it, and comfort when I broke down. But even their kindness couldn't fill the void left by my family's betrayal. I found myself questioning everything about my childhood, re-examining memories through this new lens of favoritism and neglect. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself looking at old family photos on my phone. There was a clear pattern I had never noticed before. In almost every picture, the twins were front and center, usually in matching outfits, while I stood slightly apart. In group shots, my parents flanked the twins with me off to one side. The visual evidence of my peripheral status in the family was unmistakable. I came across a photo of my grandparents and me on my 12th birthday, shortly before they passed away. Grandma had her arm around me, and Grandpa was looking at me with such pride as I held up the book of poetry they had given me. They had seen me when my own parents couldn't. Looking at their faces, I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for them, but for the future they had envisioned for me. I had been so close to fulfilling their dreams for me, attending their alma mater, studying in the same halls where they had met and fallen in love. Now that future seemed to be slipping through my fingers. The next day, I visited their graves at the small cemetery across town. I hadn't been there in months, caught up in the whirlwind of senior year and college applications. The headstone was simple but elegant, with both their names and the dates of their lives separated by 60 years. Underneath was engraved their favorite quote from Emerson: "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." I sat on the grass beside their grave, tracing the letters of their names with my finger. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I want to honor your wishes to go to Columbia like you planned, but I don't want to destroy what's left of our family." Of course, there was no answer but the gentle rustling of leaves in the cemetery trees. Yet somehow being there brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt since my birthday. My grandparents had loved me unconditionally, had seen my potential and wanted to nurture it. That love wasn't diminished by my parents' actions. As I was leaving the cemetery, my phone rang. It was Aunt Lisa again. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said after we exchanged greetings. "There's something you should know about your mother." "What's that?" I asked, getting into my car. "She was always jealous of your relationship with your grandparents," Lisa explained. "They doted on you from the moment you were born. You were their first grandchild, and they made no secret of how special they thought you were. Your mother, she had a complicated relationship with them, especially with your grandfather." "What do you mean?" "Your grandfather was a brilliant man, but he had high expectations. Your mother never quite measured up academically. She was average in school while I excelled. It created a rift that never fully healed, especially when she dropped out of college to marry your father." I had never heard this perspective before. So when the twins came along, she finally had something exceptional to present to them. Not academic achievement, but these perfect, talented granddaughters. Except by then, they had already established their special bond with you. They were proud of you in a way they never were of her. And when they created the trust fund specifically for me, it confirmed what she had always feared, that they valued your potential more than hers, and by extension, more than her children's. I think that's part of why she's been so obsessed with proving the twins' worth through their skating. It's her way of showing that her children are just as special as you. The revelation was like a missing puzzle piece, suddenly making the picture clearer. It didn't excuse what my parents had done, but it helped me understand the deeper dynamics at play. "What should I do with this information?" I asked. "Use it to approach the situation with more compassion, maybe, but don't let it deter you from standing up for yourself. Your mother's insecurities don't justify stealing your future." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time processing this new perspective. The twins weren't the only ones living in the shadow of expectations they hadn't created. My mother had been doing the same thing all her life. With this new understanding, I made a decision. I would fight for my future, but I would do it with clarity and purpose, not out of anger or revenge. This wasn't about punishing my parents. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine and honoring my grandparents' wishes. The next day, I met with Mr. Dawson, my grandparents' attorney. His office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with dark wood paneling and shelves lined with legal volumes. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my grandfather. "Victoria," he said warmly, shaking my hand, "you look so much like your grandmother. She would be proud of how you're handling this difficult situation." I explained everything that had happened, including my conversation with Amanda and what I had learned from Aunt Lisa. "I don't want to destroy my family," I concluded, "but I need to stand up for myself and for what my grandparents wanted." He nodded thoughtfully. "There are several approaches we could take. The most aggressive would be filing a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, seeking full restitution plus damages." The thought made me uncomfortable. What are the alternatives? We could start with a formal demand letter outlining the legal violations and requesting restitution. It would put them on notice that you're serious without immediately escalating to court. That approach felt right, more measured, but still firm. "Let's do that." He began drafting the letter while I sat across from him, providing details as needed. When he finished, he showed me the document formal legal language, stating that my parents had violated their duties as trustees with citations of relevant laws and a demand for full restitution within 30 days. "This will certainly get their attention," he said as I signed it. "Are you prepared for their reaction?" I took a deep breath. "I think so. I've been staying with a friend, but I know I'll have to face them eventually." "Remember that you're in the right legally and ethically. Don't let them make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself." As I left his office with a copy of the letter, I felt a strange mix of dread and empowerment. For the first time in my life, I was setting a boundary with my parents, demanding that they see me and respect me. Whatever happened next, I knew I would never go back to being the invisible daughter. That evening, Amanda texted me again. "Mom and Dad got a letter from a lawyer today. They're freaking out. Dad keeps saying you're bluffing. I wasn't surprised by their reaction. I'm not bluffing. The letter outlines exactly what they did wrong and what they need to do to fix it. I think they're starting to realize how serious this is. Dad's been on the phone with their lawyer all afternoon. It was strange having Amanda as my ally in this situation, but it felt right somehow. She was caught in our parents' dysfunction just as I was, just in a different way. How are you doing? I asked. Have you talked to them about skating yet? Not yet. Everything's so tense right now. But I'm getting closer. Talking to you gave me courage. I smiled at her message. Despite everything, a new bond was forming between us, one based on mutual support, rather than competition or resentment. The next day at school, I was called to the principal's office. To my surprise, my school counselor, Ms. Rivera, was there as well, looking concerned. Victoria, Principal Townsend said, gesturing for me to sit. Ms. Rivera has noticed a significant change in your academic performance and attitude over the past few weeks. Is everything all right at home? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, I decided that honesty was the best approach. I'm going through a difficult family situation. My parents spent my college fund, and I'm trying to figure out how to afford Columbia in the fall. Ms. Rivera leaned forward. Your acceptances and scholarships are impressive, but I had no idea you were facing financial challenges. Why didn't you come to me? It's complicated, I admitted. The money was there in a trust fund from my grandparents, but my parents used it for my sister's figure skating instead. They exchanged concerned glances. That's a serious situation, Principal Townsend said carefully. Is there anything we can do to help? Ms. Rivera was already making notes. There are additional scholarships we could still apply for emergency financial aid programs, and I have contacts at Columbia who might be able to help. Their support brought tears to my eyes. After feeling so alone in this fight, having these educators in my corner meant more than they could know. Thank you, I said sincerely. I'm trying to resolve this with my parents, but having a backup plan would be incredibly helpful. Over the next few days, I threw myself into researching every possible financial option with Ms. Rivera's help. We identified several last-minute scholarships I could apply for, explored loan options, and even looked into work-study programs at Columbia. It was exhausting and stressful, but also empowering to take control of my future instead of just reacting to my parents' betrayal. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Mr. Dawson called to let me know my parents' attorney had contacted him requesting a meeting to discuss settlement options. It was the first indication that they were taking the situation seriously. They want to negotiate, he explained, which means they recognize they don't have a strong legal position. What should I do? I asked. Let me handle the initial discussions, he advised. But eventually you'll need to decide what resolution you're willing to accept. Full restitution might not be possible immediately, given what you've told me about their financial situation. I thought about what I really wanted. Yes, the money was important, I needed it for college. But beyond that, I needed acknowledgement of the wrong they had done, recognition that my dreams mattered too. I want enough to attend Columbia, I said finally, and I want them to truly understand what they did to me. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time I wasn't the one backing down. Whatever happened next, my parents would have to face the consequences of their actions, and I would fight for the future my grandparents had wanted for me, the future I deserved. The legal battle that followed was both easier and harder than I had anticipated. Easier because the law was clearly on my side. Harder because watching my family fracture under the pressure was painful even after everything they had done. Mr. Dawson arranged a meeting with my parents and their attorney at his office. I insisted on being present despite both lawyers suggesting it might be better if I weren't. This was my future, and I wanted to look my parents in the eye as they explained their actions. The conference room was tense as we all took our seats. Mom looked like she had barely slept, her eyes red-rimmed and her usually perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Dad maintained his accountant's poker face, but the slight tremor in his hands as he arranged his papers betrayed his anxiety. Their attorney, Mr. Pelham, spoke first. We're here to discuss a resolution that works for everyone. The Hamiltons acknowledge that there were some irregularities in how the trust was managed, but they were acting in what they believed was the best interest of their family as a whole. Irregularities. Mr. Dawson repeated his tone, making it clear how inadequate the word was. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton systematically drained a trust that was explicitly designated for Victoria's education at Columbia University. They violated both the letter and spirit of the trust, as well as their fiduciary duty as trustees. Dad cleared his throat. We always intended to replace the funds. The twins' skating career is about to move to the next level with potential sponsorships and competition prizes. That's speculation, Mr. Dawson countered. What's not speculation is that Victoria is due to start college in 3 months, and the funds her grandparents set aside for that purpose are gone. Mom finally looked at me directly. Victoria, surely you understand we were doing what we thought was best. The twins have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I met her gaze steadily. And Columbia accepted me with honors. The journalism program is ranked #1 in the country. That's my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you took it from me. We didn't think it would come to this, Dad said, gesturing to the lawyers, threatening legal action against your own parents. I gave you a chance to make it right, I reminded him. You dismissed me just like you've been dismissing me for years. Mr. Pelham interceded. Let's focus on potential solutions. The Hamiltons have prepared a proposal. He slid a document across the table. Mr. Dawson reviewed it, his expression growing incredulous. This is unacceptable. They're offering to pay back less than 20% of what was taken on an extended timeline that wouldn't even begin until after Victoria should have started college. It's what we can afford right now, Dad insisted. With the twins' training expenses. That's exactly the problem, I interrupted, unable to contain myself. You're still prioritizing their skating over my education even now. The meeting deteriorated from there with no resolution reached. As we prepared to leave, Mom tried once more. Victoria, please, come home. We can work this out as a family. This stopped being a family matter when you decided 2 daughters' dreams outweighed the third's, I replied, gathering my things. Now it's a legal matter. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal correspondence and emotional turmoil. My parents tried everything to avoid court alternating between attempts at reconciliation and thinly veiled threats about how a lawsuit would affect the family's reputation and finances. Meanwhile, Amanda continued to text me regularly. One day, her message caught me completely off guard. I told them I want to quit skating. How did they take it? I wrote back immediately. Dad yelled, Mom cried, Allison is confused. But I stood my ground. I used some of what you said about my mental health mattering more than their investment. Pride swelled in my chest. I'm so proud of you. That took real courage. It felt good, she admitted. Scary, but good. For the first time, I feel like I have some control over my life. 2 days later, she sent me a bombshell. I showed them proof that they've been using your trust money specifically for my competitions. Dad's spreadsheets where he tracks all skating expenses. He labels the trust withdrawals separately. My heart raced. How did you find those? They've been careless lately. Dad left his laptop open. I took photos of everything and sent them to Mr. Dawson's email. This was exactly the evidence we needed, concrete proof that they had knowingly and systematically used my trust fund specifically for the twins' skating, not for general family expenses, as they were now claiming. When Mr. Dawson called to confirm he had received Amanda's evidence, he could barely contain his satisfaction. This changes everything, Victoria. With this documentation, they have no defense. Your father literally labeled the withdrawals as coming from your trust fund and going to skating expenses. What happens now? I asked. I'm sending their lawyer these documents with a final settlement demand. If they don't agree to full restitution with a reasonable payment plan, we file the lawsuit immediately. 3 days later, I received a text from Dad, the first direct communication in weeks. We need to talk. No lawyers. I consulted with Mr. Dawson, who advised caution, but said it was my decision whether to meet with them. Just don't sign anything or make any promises without consulting me first, he warned. I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, I was surprised to see not just my parents, but Amanda as well. Allison was noticeably absent. Dad looked defeated in a way I had never seen before. His shoulders slumped, the confident posture of the family provider completely gone. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying, but there was something different in her expression, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," Dad said as I sat down. "We've received the updated settlement demand from your lawyer." And, I prompted, when he didn't continue. "We're going to comply," Mom said quietly. "Full restitution." I was stunned. After weeks of resistance, this sudden capitulation seemed too good to be true. "What changed?" Dad glanced at Amanda, who met my eyes with quiet determination. "I showed them the truth," she said simply. "And I made them see what they've been doing, not just to you, but to me too. Amanda has decided to stop competitive skating," Mom explained, her voice strained. "And in light of everything, we've been doing some serious soul searching." Dad pushed a folder toward me. "This is our financial situation. We've taken out a second mortgage on the house to cover the immediate restitution payment for your first year at Columbia. The rest will come in monthly payments while you're in school." I opened the folder, scanning the documents with disbelief. They were doing exactly what Mr. Dawson had demanded. Why now, after all the resistance? "The evidence Amanda provided made it clear we would lose in court," Dad admitted. "But more than that, we've realized how badly we failed you. And it's not just about the money," Mom added, tears streaming down her face. "We've been talking a lot since Amanda made her announcement, about our obsession with the twins skating, about how we've neglected you, about why we did what we did." "Aunt Lisa told me about your relationship with Grandpa," I said cautiously. "How you felt you never measured up." Mom looked surprised, then resigned. "Of course she did. Lisa always understood our parents better than I did." She took a deep breath. "It's true. When the twins showed talent in skating, I saw it as my chance to finally present something exceptional to my father. But he was already gone by then, and instead of recognizing that, I just pushed harder." "We lost perspective," Dad admitted. "We convinced ourselves that the twins' potential justified everything, their happiness, their future, their success. We didn't see what it was costing you or them." Amanda reached across the table and took my hand. "I never wanted to be the reason you couldn't go to college, Victoria. I never wanted any of this pressure. When I finally told them I was quitting, it was like the whole house of cards collapsed." "What about Allison?" I asked. "Is she still skating?" "Yes," Mom said, "but with a major difference. We've had to be honest with her about our financial situation. She understands that we can only afford local coaching now, not the elite training she's been receiving. She's disappointed, but handling it surprisingly well." I wasn't sure what to feel. After weeks of anger and betrayal, seeing my parents finally acknowledge what they had done was both satisfying and disorienting. "What happens now?" "We make this right," Dad said firmly. "You go to Columbia as your grandparents intended. We pay back every penny we took from you. And," he hesitated, looking uncertain for the first time, "we hope that someday you might be able to forgive us, though we understand that may take a very long time." I looked at my parents, seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as the infallible authorities of my childhood, but as flawed human beings who had made serious mistakes. The anger that had sustained me through this ordeal began to shift, not disappearing, but transforming into something more complex. "I can't promise forgiveness right now," I said honestly, "but I appreciate that you're finally taking responsibility." "Will you come home?" Mom asked hopefully. I shook my head. "Not yet. I need more time. But," I glanced at Amanda, whose support had been unexpected but crucial, "maybe we can start rebuilding step by step." As I left the coffee shop that day, I felt the first genuine sense of resolution. The legal battle was ending, my college future was secure, and though my family relationships were deeply damaged, there was at least acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning of something new, something healthier, and more honest than what had come before. 3 months later, I stood in my dorm room at Columbia University, unpacking the last of my belongings. The small space was nothing like my room at home, more cramped with institutional furniture and bare walls waiting to be personalized. Yet, it represented everything I had fought for, a future of my own, choosing a chance to pursue my dreams. The journey to this moment had been complicated and painful. After our coffee shop meeting, my parents had followed through on their promises. The first installment of the restitution came through enough to cover my freshman year tuition and housing. The legal documents were signed establishing a payment schedule for the remainder of what they had taken from my trust. I had moved back home for the final month before college, though the atmosphere was strained. Allison was still competing, but at a reduced level with a local coach. She had been cold to me at first, blaming me for the family's financial difficulties and Amanda's decision to quit skating. But gradually, she began to understand the larger dynamics at play, especially after Amanda opened up to her about the pressure and unhappiness she had felt. My parents were different too. Subdued, careful around me, clearly making an effort to show interest in my preparations for Columbia. Mom helped me shop for dorm essentials, while Dad spent hours researching the best laptop for journalism students. Their efforts were obvious, sometimes awkwardly so, but I appreciated the attempt. Amanda had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Free from the grinding schedule of elite skating, she discovered new interests: photography, environmental activism, normal teenage social activities. The shadows under her eyes disappeared, and she laughed more freely. We grew closer than we had ever been, bonding over late-night talks about our parents, our futures, and the strange journey that had brought us to this new understanding. The day I left for New York was emotional. Dad insisted on driving me himself, loading the car meticulously with all my belongings. Mom cried, of course, but there was pride mixed with the sadness. The twins gave me identical journals to document your Columbia adventure, Amanda explained. Standing in my dorm room now, placing the journals on my desk, I felt a complex mix of emotions. The betrayal still hurt, the trust still damaged. But I had discovered a strength in myself I never knew I possessed: the courage to stand up for my worth, to demand respect, to fight for my future. My roommate Jasmine returned from the campus bookstore with our textbooks. We had connected instantly during orientation, both journalism majors with a passion for investigative reporting. "Your parents call yet?" she asked, dumping the heavy books on her bed. "Mine have texted like 20 times today." "Not yet," I replied. "They're giving me space to settle in." This was new territory for us, a relationship built on cautious respect rather than the unbalanced dynamic of the past. They had promised not to overwhelm me with communication, understanding that I needed to establish my independence. That evening, I attended a welcome reception for scholarship recipients. Through Ms. Rivera's tireless efforts, I had secured additional funding to supplement what my parents were repaying. The trauma of nearly losing my college opportunity had motivated me to apply for every scholarship available, resulting in several awards that recognized my academic achievements and journalism potential. As I mingled with other scholars and faculty members, I found myself sharing parts of my story. Not the bitter details of betrayal, but the broader narrative of fighting for my education and discovering my own voice in the process. To my surprise, many of the professors and administrators nodded with recognition. "Family financial situations can be complicated," one journalism professor commented. "What matters is that you're here now, ready to make the most of this opportunity." Her words stayed with me as I walked back to my dorm, through the historic campus, passing buildings my grandparents had once inhabited. I imagined them walking these same paths decades ago, falling in love, dreaming of their future. They had wanted this experience. For me, had planned for it, had believed in my potential, enough to secure it financially. Though they hadn't lived to see me fulfill their dream, I felt their presence strongly that night. Back in my room, I found an email from my mother. Unlike her previous communications full of guilt and justification, this one was different. "Victoria," she wrote, "as you begin this new chapter, I want you to know how proud I am of you, not just for your academic achievements, but for your strength and conviction. You stood up for yourself when we failed you, and in doing so, you forced us to confront some difficult truths about our family dynamics. While I regret the circumstances that brought us here, I am grateful for the awakening it has prompted. Your grandfather once told me that true character reveals itself not when things are easy, but when they are most difficult. You have shown remarkable character throughout this ordeal. I hope that someday I can rebuild your trust, but I understand that will take time. For now, please know that I am working on myself, trying to understand why I allowed my own insecurities to affect how I parented you. Columbia is lucky to have you. Learn everything you can, make friends who challenge and support you, and never doubt your worth the way I allowed you to for too many years. With love and respect, Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I read her words. It wasn't a magical fix for years of feeling secondary for the betrayal of my trust fund, for the pain of being the invisible daughter, but it was acknowledgement. It was the beginning of something new. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into college life, embracing the academic challenges and social opportunities. I joined the university newspaper, made friends with fellow journalism students, and found mentors among the faculty. For the first time in my life, I existed completely as my own person, not in relation to my talented sisters or my parents' expectations. The distance helped me gain perspective on what had happened. I came to understand that while my parents' actions had been wrong inexcusably, so they had been motivated by a complex tangle of their own insecurities, societal pressure, and misguided priorities. This understanding didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me begin to process it. Amanda and I spoke weekly, her updates filled with newfound enthusiasm for normal high school experiences, junior prom driver's ed applying to colleges based on her own interests rather than athletic scholarships. She was discovering herself just as I was freed from the roles we had both been assigned in our family narrative. Even Allison and I found a new connection. After her initial resentment faded, she admitted that she had always felt trapped by being one half of the twins. She loved skating, but chafed under the weight of being defined solely by that talent. With the pressure reduced by financial reality, she was finding a more sustainable relationship with the sport. As for my parents, our relationship remained a work in progress. The monthly restitution payments arrived punctually, each one a tangible acknowledgement of their commitment to making amends. Our conversations were careful, sometimes awkward, but increasingly genuine. Dad sent articles about journalism ethics that he thought might interest me. Mom asked questions about my classes and actually listened to the answers. One day in late October, I received a small package from home. Inside was my grandmother's fountain pen, which she had used throughout her college years at Columbia. "Found this in the attic," Dad's note read. "Thought it should be with you now." The gesture moved me deeply. It was a recognition of my place in my grandparents' legacy, an acknowledgement of the connection that had been so special to me. That night I used the pen to write in one of the journals the twins had given me, reflecting on everything that had happened since my 18th birthday. The betrayal, the fight, the resolution, the new beginnings. I wrote about the pain of feeling invisible in my own family, and the strength I had found in standing up for myself. I wrote about forgiveness, not as an obligation, but as a possibility, something that might come with time and continued healing. As I wrote, I realized I had gained something invaluable through this difficult journey. I had learned that my worth wasn't dependent on my parents' recognition or anyone else's validation. I had discovered that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I had found that true family relationships must be built on respect and honesty, not obligation and silence. In the months and years that followed, these lessons would guide me through college and beyond. The trust fund battle had been painful, but it had forced a necessary reckoning in our family, breaking destructive patterns and creating space for more authentic relationships. My parents would never be perfect, and our history could never be erased. But we were finding a new way forward, one built on truth rather than illusion. As I put away my grandmother's pen that night, I felt her presence strongly, as if she were sitting beside me in my small dorm room. "You would be proud," I whispered, "not just of Columbia, but of how I fought for it." And somewhere I felt certain she was. I often think back to that devastating birthday when I learned that 95% of my trust fund had been spent on my sisters. At the time, it felt like the end of my dreams and my relationship with my parents. Instead, it became the catalyst for growth authenticity and a deeper understanding of my own strength. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or invisible in your own family, I hope my story reminds you that your dreams matter. Your future matters. And sometimes standing up for yourself is the greatest act of self-love. Have you ever had to fight for recognition in your family or stand up for something that was rightfully yours? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every comment and would love to hear how you navigated your own family challenges. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories of overcoming family struggles and finding your own path. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it.